My name is Margaret Turner, but everyone who knows me just calls me Maggie. I'm 57 years old, an American woman who once believed she had the perfect life or close enough to it. I was a wife, a mother, and for many years the silent partner in my husband's growing business. I used to think my life would play out in quiet stability. I imagined I'd grow old in the house we built together, watch my grandchildren play in the garden, and leave behind a family legacy that would carry my husband's name with pride. But life has a way of shaking you when you least expect it, stripping away everything you thought was secure. The day my husband died, my world collapsed. But what I didn't know was that his death would only be the beginning of a much bigger storm. It was a cold morning in October, the kind of morning when the wind bites your skin and the trees shiver with the last of their autumn leaves. I remember sitting at the hospital bed, holding Robert's hand, watching the man who built everything I knew, the company, the home, our life, slip away. He was more than just my husband. He was my partner, my confidant, and my anchor. When he took his last breath, thought the hardest chapter of my life had begun. I was wrong. The hardest part was still waiting for me, wearing the face of my own flesh and blood. My son, Daniel, was 32 at the time, sharp, ambitious, and married to Claire, a woman whose smile was as polished as glass and twice as cold. I never disliked Claire, not at first. She was charming enough when they were dating, polite at family dinners, and eager to prove she belonged. But once she had the wedding band on her finger, things changed. She became bolder, sharper, hungrier. Robert used to say, "Maggie, she's young, she's mature. Daniel loves her, and that's what matters." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to trust that love could soften her edges. But after Robert's funeral, the truth began to show. I'll never forget the day Daniel and Claire sat across from me in Robert's study. The room still smelled of his cologne, his books lined up in perfect order, his old leather chair still indented from his weight. I thought we were going to talk about funeral expenses, maybe even how we'd keep the company running in his absence. Instead, Daniel pushed a stack of papers across the desk. "Mom," he said, his voice firm in a way that made my stomach turn. "Dad left the company in my hands. Claire and I are taking over." I blinked at the papers, my heart pounding. "Daniel, your father always said this business was our family's. I've worked beside him for years. He wanted it to be shared, to stay whole." Claire leaned forward, her manicured fingers tapping the desk. "With all due respect, Maggie, you don't have the experience. The company needs direction, and Daniel is the future. You should enjoy retirement. Focus on yourself." The words hit me like ice water. Retirement? Focus on myself. Robert hadn't even been gone a month, and already they were pushing me aside. I looked at my son, hoping to see some flicker of compassion in his eyes, but all I saw was resolve. He had already chosen his side. "I'll still be part of it," I insisted, my voice trembling but steady. "I'll stay on the board." "That's what your father wanted." Daniel shook his head. "No, Mom, Dad signed everything over to me. You'll be comfortable. We'll make sure of that. But the company is mine now." I felt the blood drain from my face. Comfortable, like I was some elderly relative to be tucked away and forgotten. I wanted to argue, to fight, but Claire's smile stopped me cold. She had orchestrated this. I could see it in the way she sat back, victorious already. That night I cried harder than I did at Robert's funeral. Not because of the money, not even because of the business. I cried because I realized I had lost my son. Weeks passed and the distance between us grew. Daniel and Claire tightened their grip on the company, shutting me out of meetings, decisions, even family gatherings. I was no longer the matriarch, I was a burden. Then came the final blow. One rainy evening, Daniel showed up at my door with Claire standing stiffly beside him. He didn't even sit down. He just cleared his throat and said, "Mom, we've decided it's best if you move out of the house." The house. The one Robert and I built, brick by brick, memory by memory. The one where Daniel had grown up. "You can't be serious," I whispered, my heart hammering. Claire crossed her arms. "We've already arranged everything. There's a lovely retirement home downtown. You'll have company your own age. It'll be better for you, better for me." As if exile could ever be better. I wanted to scream to throw them both out, but the shock held me still. Within a week, I was packed up and driven to a gray building with smiling staff and polished floors. The retirement home. My new prison. At first, I was numb. I wandered the halls, ate meals in silence, and cried myself to sleep. I felt like my life was over, like everything I had worked for had been stolen. But something inside me refused to give up. Maybe it was Robert's voice echoing in my mind, reminding me of my worth. Maybe it was sheer stubbornness. Whatever it was, I decided I wouldn't let betrayal be the end of me. I began talking to the women around me. Many had stories like mine, abandoned by children, discarded by families, forgotten by society. But beneath their pain, I saw something else: talent, resilience, and fire. There was Joan, a retired teacher who knew how to write proposals like a pro. Martha, who baked pies so good they could melt your soul. Evelyn, who had worked in finance before her husband left her penniless. And me, Maggie Turner, the woman everyone thought was finished. It started small. We baked, we sewed, we sold little crafts at weekend markets. The staff laughed at us, called it busy work, but we knew better. This wasn't busy work. This was survival. This was the seed of something greater. The first time we made a profit was only a few $100s, but I felt a spark ignite inside me. A spark I hadn't felt in years. For the first time since Robert died, I felt alive. Little did I know, this fire was about to grow into a fire that would change everything. I never imagined that the retirement home, that gray building I once thought of as my exile, would become the birthplace of my second life. At first, I hated everything about it. The way the hallways smelled faintly of bleach and cafeteria food. The squeak of rubber soles on linoleum floors. The endless chatter of nurses reminding us of pills and bedtimes. I felt like I had been stuffed into a box labeled finished, but I wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. It started on a Saturday morning. The staff had organized a little craft day in the lounge. Most of us didn't care. Some sat half asleep in wheelchairs, others just stared out the window. But I was restless. I couldn't keep replaying Daniel's words in my head. "It's best if you move out," every time I thought of it. The anger rose in me like a tide dot. So when Joan, the retired teacher I'd met at lunch a few days before, asked if I wanted to help her with a quilt, I said yes. Not because I cared about sewing, but because I needed something to do with my hands before I screamed. Joan was sharp-eyed, gray-haired, and full of opinions. "These kids today don't know discipline," she said, pushing a needle through fabric with more force than necessary. "But you and I, we know how to get things done." As we stitched, Martha waddled over with a tray of muffins. She was a plump woman with cheeks like ripe apples and a laugh that made the walls shake. "Try one of these, Maggie," she said. "My daughter used to beg me to open a bakery, but my husband said it wasn't practical." I took a bite, and for the first time since I'd moved into that place, I smiled. It was the best blueberry muffin I'd ever tasted. That was the moment it hit me. We weren't useless. We weren't finished. We were sitting on a gold mine of talent, wisdom, and experience. The world had thrown us away. But maybe, just maybe, we could build something from what was left. I shared the thought with Joan and Martha that afternoon. What if we tried selling some of this? Your muffins, Jones quilts, maybe even small services. We could set up a booth at the weekend market downtown. Joan raised an eyebrow. You mean like a business? Why not? I shrugged. We've got time, we've got skills, and frankly, I'm tired of feeling like a ghost. Martha clapped her flour-dusted hands together. Honey, I've been waiting 50 years for someone to say that. And just like that, the seed was planted. Of course, the staff thought we were out of our minds. When I asked the director if we could use the common kitchen for baking, she laughed. Mrs. Turner, this is a retirement home, not a business incubator. If you ladies want to bake for fun, fine. But don't start any trouble. That only made me more determined. We worked in secret at first, sneaking ingredients from our own money, baking late at night, stitching quilts by the glow of dim lamps, whispering plans like schoolgirls plotting mischief. Evelyn, the former finance worker, caught wind of what we were doing and asked to join. If you're going to sell anything, you'll need someone who understands numbers, she said. And I do. By the end of the month, there were 6 of us. We pooled our money, rented a small booth at the Saturday market, and set it up with muffins, quilts, knitted scarves, and a few hand-painted cards from another resident. Rose, I'll never forget that first morning our table looked so humble compared to the glossy displays around us. I was terrified we'd go home empty-handed, humiliated. But then a woman walked by, stopped, and picked up one of Joan's quilts. This is beautiful, she said. How much? Joan stammered, unsure what to say, so I stepped in. 150. The woman didn't blink. She pulled out her wallet and paid on the spot. That sale was the spark. By noon, Martha's muffins were gone. Rose's cards had sold out, and we had made over $800. $800. For women who had been told they were finished, it felt like striking gold. We went back to the home giddy with excitement. For the first time, people were laughing in the halls, whispering about possibilities, planning for next week. The staff rolled their eyes, but we didn't care. We had tasted success, and it was sweeter than any muffin. Of course, success never comes without challenges. The second week, the health inspector stopped by our booth and asked for permits we didn't have. I thought we'd lose everything right then, but Evelyn jumped in with her nonsense tone. We're a registered nonprofit collective for seniors. She lied smoothly. We're raising funds for community enrichment. The inspector shrugged and walked away. Later, I scolded her. Evelyn, we can't just lie our way through this. She smirked. Relax, Maggie. I'll file the paperwork tomorrow. By next week, we'll be legitimate, and she did. She registered us as a women's cooperative, secured small business permits, and even found a grant for senior-led initiatives. I was floored. That's when I realized something. I wasn't just building a hobby. I was building a movement. Word spread quickly. Local papers started picking up our story. Retirement home residents start small business. Photographers came by to snap pictures of us in aprons, smiling with flour on our hands. Customers began asking if we could take special orders. We were no longer a handful of forgotten women, we were entrepreneurs. But for me, it wasn't just about muffins or quilts. It was about reclaiming my life. Every dollar we earned was a piece of my dignity stitched back together. Every laugh we shared was proof that betrayal hadn't killed Met, had awakened me still. In the quiet of the night, I couldn't stop thinking about Daniel and Claire. I wondered if they even thought about me, if they cared that I was rebuilding. I told myself I didn't care, that I was stronger without them. But deep down, I wanted them to see me rise. I wanted them to regret what they had done, and oh, how they would. Because while we were climbing, they were falling. I didn't know it yet, but Daniel and Claire's empire was starting to crack. Their greed, their arrogance, their blind belief that I was irrelevant would all come back to haunt them. but for now, focused on the fire in front of me. I poured my energy into the cooperative, guiding the women, teaching them how to pitch, how to negotiate, how to believe in themselves again. Each small win fueled the next. One evening, after a long day at the market, Joan turned to me and said, "Maggie, you saved us. You saved me." I shook my head. "No, Joan, we saved each other. And we're just getting started." She smiled. And for the first time, I felt something I hadn't felt since Robert died. Hope. What none of us knew was that this small spark, this little business born in a retirement home, was about to grow into a firestorm that would change not just our lives, but the lives of everyone who ever doubted us. The retirement home had never been so alive. What once was a place of silence, television reruns, and half-hearted bingo nights had transformed into a hive of activity. You could smell Martha's muffins baking in the kitchen, hear the hum of sewing machines from Joan's corner, and catch Evelyn at the table with her calculator, scribbling numbers and shaking her head whenever someone forgot to track expenses. And me, I had become the ringmaster of it all. It wasn't a role I asked for, but it fit me like a second skin. For the first time since Robert died, I felt like myself. Again, no, not just myself. I felt more, stronger, wiser, determined. The small business we had built from scraps of fabric and recipes was no longer small. Word spread faster than we could keep up. Local papers had written about us, but then came the radio interview. And then one evening, a producer from a morning TV show called. "We'd like to feature your cooperative," she said. "Women over 50 reinventing themselves. That's a story people need to hear." I almost dropped the phone. The next week, we were standing under bright studio lights, cameras rolling as Martha handed the host a muffin and Joan showed off her quilts. They asked me to share our story, and I spoke from the heart. We were left behind. I said, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. We were told our time had passed, but we're here to prove that experience isn't a burden, it's a gift, and no one can take that from us. The audience clapped. Martha cried. Evelyn whispered, "You just sold out every muffin in the state." She wasn't wrong. Orders poured in. By the time we got back to the home, our little shared cell phone was buzzing non-stop. People wanted catering for events, custom quilts, even business mentorship for older women. We had tapped into something bigger than muffins or fabrique, had tapped into the hunger of women like us to matter again, of course. With growth came challenges. We needed space. We couldn't keep using the retirement home kitchen forever, not with the staff glaring at us every time we took over the ovens. Evelyn and I started scouting rental spaces. The first few were depressing, crumbling warehouses or tiny storefronts we couldn't afford. But then we found it, an old bakery downtown, shuttered for years, but with good bones. "We can't afford this," Joan muttered when I showed them. "Not yet," I said. "But we will." We pitched to the local women's business fund. We stood in a room full of investors, most of them skeptical, some downright dismissive. One man smirked and said, "Ladies, this sounds like a hobby, not a company." I looked him dead in the eye and said, "Sir, hobbies don't create jobs, and we already have more orders than we can fill." We walked out with a grant. Not a huge one, but enough to get the bakery up and running. The day we unlocked those doors, painted the walls, and hung up our sign, the Second Act Women's Cooperative, I felt Robert's spirit in the room with me. He would have been proud. He always said I was smarter than I gave myself credit for, and now I was proving it. Business boomed. We hired other women from the home, and soon even women outside the home applied. Divorcees, widows, retirees, Women's Society had written off found new purpose within our walls. Each one brought something to the table. Together, we created not just a business, but a family. Meanwhile, Daniel and Claire's empire was cracking. I didn't see it firsthand, but whispers reached me through mutual acquaintances. They expanded too quickly, took on debts they couldn't handle, and ignored the basics Robert had always lived by: patience, discipline, honesty. As I was closing up the bakery, I spotted Claire in the parking lot of a restaurant across the street. She didn't see me. She was arguing with a man in a sharp suit, her face twisted with frustration. I didn't need to hear the words to know it was about money. I should have felt pity, but I didn't. Not yet. It was too soon, and the wound they had left in me was still raw. Months passed, and the cracks became chasms. Customers fled their business after shady practices came to light. Lawsuits piled up. Their perfect facade began to crumble. Then came the day I learned Claire had left Daniel. It was Evelyn who told me, reading it from her tablet like breaking news. "Filed for divorce last week," she said. "Guess the money ran out." I wanted to feel triumphant, but all I felt was a quiet, aching sadness. This was my son. My boy who once held my hand as we crossed the street, who used to kiss my cheek goodnight. I couldn't erase the memory of him as a child, even as I faced the man who had betrayed me. Still, I pressed on, because the truth was I couldn't afford to let my heart soften. Not yet. We grew faster than I could keep up with. Our cooperative caught the attention of national outlets. We were invited to a women's entrepreneurship summit in New York. I stood on that stage, facing hundreds of people, and told them our story. I was thrown away, I said, by the very people I thought would love me most. But I learned something. Life doesn't end when they shut the door on you. Sometimes that's when it begins. The applause shook the room. And as I stood there basking in it, I realized this wasn't just my revenge. This was my rebirth. But the greatest twist was still to come, because as I rose higher, Daniel fell lower. And one day our paths would cross again when he walked through my door. Not as a son returning home, but as a man begging for a job. And on that day, he would finally see the truth. The mother he had thrown away was not just surviving, she was thriving. And she was the one in power now. I will never forget the day he walked back into my life. It was a gray Tuesday, the kind where the clouds hung so low they seemed to press against the windows of our office. The cooperative had grown beyond anything I'd imagined. We had offices now, an entire team, and my desk bore the title plate that read, Executive Director, Margaret Callahan. I was reviewing a proposal for expanding into neighboring states when my assistant poked her head in. "Maggie, there's a man here asking to see you. Says his name is Daniel." My heart skipped. For a second, I couldn't breathe. "Send him in," I said. My voice steady, though my hands trembled under the desk. And then, there he was. My son, but not the proud, confident man who once strutted around in tailored suits. This Daniel was hollow-eyed, his shoulders slumped, his suit worn at the edges. Life had stripped him of his arrogance. "Mom," he whispered. His voice cracked. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hug him and shake him all at once. But I stayed seated, my hands folded neatly, because I knew the moment had to be his. "What brings you here?" I asked. He swallowed hard. I need work. The business. It's gone. Claire's gone. I lost everything. Silence hung between us. The boy who had once kicked me out of my own home now stood begging for a place in mine. "Why here, Daniel?" I asked softly. "Why come to me?" His eyes glistened. "Because you always knew how to make things work. And I didn't. I thought I was better than you. I thought I didn't need you. I was wrong. It was the apology I had longed for, though it came wrapped in desperation. I leaned back, studying him. You turned your back on me when I needed you most. You and Claire stripped me of everything your father and I built. You left me in that old home, Daniel. Do you remember that? Tears filled his eyes. Yes, and I regret it every single day. For the first time in years, I let myself really look at him. The wrinkles at his temples, the weight of failure on his shoulders. He was still my son, my blood. But he was also a man who had betrayed me in ways I would never fully forget. I stood slowly and walked to the window. Do you know what I found in that old home, Daniel? He shook his head. I found freedom. I found strength I didn't know I had. I found women who became my sisters. Together we built something greater than anything your father and I could have dreamed of. You left me with nothing, but in that nothing I found everything. He lowered his head. I know, I see it now. For a long moment I let the silence stretch. My heart battled my mind. Part of me wanted to slam the door in his face. But another part, the mother who had once cradled him, who had wiped his tears when he was small, couldn't ignore him entirely. Finally, I turned back. I can't erase what you did, Daniel. I can't pretend it didn't happen. But I won't let bitterness poison the rest of my years. If you want a job here, you'll earn it. Not as my son. As just another employee. You'll start at the bottom, under the supervision of people you once would have looked down on. And you'll work harder than you ever have in your life. You understand? His mouth opened, closed, then opened again. Yes, Mom, I'll do anything. And for the first time, I saw humility in his eyes. Real humility. I called Evelyn into the room and told her, put him in logistics. Starting salary, entry level. Treat him like anyone else. She raised an eyebrow, but nodded. Daniel worked. To his credit, he worked hard. At first, the women didn't trust him. They whispered behind his back, kept their distance. But slowly, he proved himself. He hauled crates, drove deliveries, stayed late when no one asked him to. For once in his life, he was learning what it meant to build, not just to take. I kept my distance, watching from my office. Every night when I closed my door, I asked myself if I had made the right choice. Some days the answer felt like yes, others like no. But then came the day when we hosted our annual gala. The one where we showcased new projects and honored our women. Hundreds attended. I stood on stage accepting applause when I saw him in the crowd, Daniel, standing tall, clapping with tears streaming down his face. Afterward, he approached me. I'll never deserve your forgiveness, he said, but I hope someday you can give it anyway. I put my hand on his shoulder. Forgiveness isn't about deserving, Daniel. It's about peace. And I've found mine. We embraced, awkward, broken, but real in that moment. I realized something. My revenge wasn't in watching him suffer. My revenge was in showing him that I could rise, thrive, and lead without him. My triumph was turning betrayal into a legacy, one that couldn't be taken away. Today, when I walk into our headquarters, yes, headquarters, I see rows of women working, laughing, creating. Women's society once cast aside, now running their own lives. That's my victory. That's my story. And if you're listening to me now, if you've ever been told you're too old, too broken, too forgotten, hear this. It is never too late. The lessons you've carried, the scars you've earned, the wisdom you've gathered, they are not your burden. They are your fire. I was thrown away, but I rose. And so can you.